Hello, Haley. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Sai?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for being
Good.
here.
Well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So we have the great opportunity to be with Haley today. And this is, of course, in anticipation of the May 13th Rethinking Women's Leadership in Business event with Andy Simon and the Women
Mhm.
Business Collaborative. And we are very fortunate to get time with you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Always happy to talk to you, Sai.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Would love for you to introduce yourself and we can dive in a little bit more deeply then.
Sure. My name is Hayley Camus. I have I wear many hats. I work in integrative medicine as an integrative energy practitioner. I also provide other types of relaxation and stress modification modalities. I'm a Reiki master. I provide Jin Shin Jitsu, a therapeutic touch, clinical Qigong, impact acupressure. I'm a guided imagery therapist, number of other modalities. I've worked in healthcare. I work for a local hospital system in New Jersey that's one of the top 50 in the country, as a matter of fact. And when there was an integrative medicine program, unfortunately, between COVID and financial needs and such with the times, the program is no longer. So I'm embarking on an adventure with one of my former colleagues and my good friend Terry Gordon to we're creating, although I guess you could say it's already been created, a platform for humanized telepractice. So people can sign up to work with someone in the healing arts. You can sign up on demand for a session. If you need it right now, you can schedule a session. And whereas we're starting off with Reiki, we're going to be expanding from there. It's very exciting. And I see clients on my own. I have my own practice as well.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
and I'm a speech pathologist. So I'm sort of
Wonderful.
things.
Wonderful. And that was, I mean, and very openly, I mean, this is one of the reasons I really, really wanted to invite your voice is, just human history, right? And the way that we've evolved, here we are today. The world needs a little bit of healing all around in any which facet you look at it.
I think the world could use a lot more than a little bit of healing. I think we all could.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we talked about this before, Sai, but I wasn't all that surprised when COVID hit because, in my observation, we as a society, in Western society, have been moving at such a fast pace, just going and going and going with work hours that we're putting in and over scheduling ourselves and constantly running. The areas where we're putting our energy into things, um, it and the way that we're using the environment, the environment couldn't sustain this kind of activity and demands of it, that it really was no surprise to me that COVID hit, because we all, and this is just coming from my perspective, we all kind of needed that cosmic push of stop.
Yeah.
Please just stop. I am not minimizing by any means the losses that have occurred because of COVID and the ongoing struggles and the PTSD that patients and staff, healthcare staff, and frontline workers in all areas, in terms of public works and everywhere, our teachers, our parents. This has been such a challenging time. And not that I, again, minimize the tragedy of it and the trauma of it. It does allow us all to stop and to think about what's important in our lives, who's important in our lives, what we want to be doing with our time, how we want to be in the world. And it's giving us, I mean, in addition to something to heal from in this moment, it's giving us the space to heal a lot of the trauma that we've all brought with us to this point. And the way that I see it, and from my perspective in the work that I do, it's all about bringing light into the world. We've had a lot of darkness, especially these last few years. We all have that bit of light in us, sometimes we can't find it. And that happens to everybody, myself included.
Yeah.
But it's our birthright. And when we can find it and when we can share it, it gives us energy, perspective, and a certain ease and sense of calm that we don't have to struggle, that we can be more than our suffering.
Mm-hmm. I love that. We can definitely be more than our suffering.
Yeah.
Exactly to your point, Hayley.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend, as you look at the landscape and you look at leadership, you look at male, female leadership in organizations, there is trauma, there is struggle across the world. You know, what would you say is one thing that we could really, really do as individuals to make a difference?
In terms of leadership?
In terms of leadership and really in any way and every way possible. You know, what is one thing that I could do? What is one thing that other folks can do?
Well, I think that maybe we need to stop looking at leadership in terms of the physical properties of the person who's leading. It's about being kind. It's about being professional, working within your scope of practice. My husband, Alan, that you know well, always says that you should hire people smarter than you. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a competition. It's about coming together for a common goal and a common outcome. I think it's just about being honest and being yourself and who you are, being comfortable in your own skin. And also it's May, and it happens to be Better Speech and Hearing Month as a speech pathologist. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot and how I can bring that into my energy work. I think a big part of being a good leader is being a good listener. Mm-hmm. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen more, speak less. And learning how to actively listen and to take what our coworkers, colleagues, supervisors, subordinates share with us, to take that as just information. It's not personal, and working to find a common goal. I mean, this is all that's a hard question for me to answer, Sai, because it's a very loose concept. Because when it comes to leadership, for me, it's about coming together with a common goal and wanting the group to me, it's always about light. It's about how can we bring light into the world. We're producing a product. We're putting together a plan. We're organizing a structure. Where whatever it might be, everybody being on the same page with what the goal is and what the benefit of that goal is, because everything that everybody does has a purpose. And being comfortable and proud of that and working together as equal members of the team. Different people have different strengths. There needs to be a leader, but it has to be somebody who's trustworthy, who's going to listen, and who's also going to be able to quiet the noise. Sometimes there's just a lot of noise of talking that distracts. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't know that I have any kind of formula or opinion, and we've talked about this before. Yeah. In terms of leadership, it's just about coming in and being who you are and being honest and kind and supportive. Just be a good human.
Just imagine that.
Yeah. Yes. Just be a good human. It's pretty much it. I have that philosophy, if you will, or that approach has driven me everywhere that I've ever worked, in any field, in any capacity.
It's so powerful because, exactly to your point, it is a bit of a loose concept around mm-hmm. which an industry among industries has been built around that loose concept. And, and literally selling services to training services, consulting, whatever you want to call it, to organizations mm-hmm. and individuals, etc. There's 2 pieces I'd love for you to elaborate on that you mentioned. One is bringing light into the world and having that impact. And then, exactly as you've mentioned, being a good human. And if I get to a real crux question, why is it so difficult for people just to be, as my colleague would say, decent, or exactly as you mentioned, just being a good human?
Why is it so hard? Okay, well, first I want to backtrack for a second on what you
Yeah.
said when you're talking about an industry within industries of consulting and coaching and such. And I think this might help answer the follow-up questions the specific questions you just asked,
Yeah.
that sometimes we get in our own way.
Yeah.
I think that I
I love
think
that. I love that sigh, by the way. That was perfect. Forgive me.
I've been practicing. Been practicing my whole life for that sigh. That sigh. Um, I think there are a number of aspects that go into it. Again, this is my observation. I don't know how right or wrong, or again, just information that I'm providing. I've worked with people from all over the world, all cultures, all languages, all religious backgrounds, all cultural backgrounds. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in corporate America. I've worked in education. I've worked in a number of different fields. And I think, in my humble opinion, that we all come into this world and we want to have an impact. We want to make a mark. We are driven to have purpose in our lives. And that is a fluid concept because we do that in so many different ways at different stages in our lives based on the raw materials we have, whether it's socioeconomically, whether it's access to education, whether it's developmental. At different stages in our lives, we're able to comprehend different concepts. As we grow older and we start using more of what are called executive function skills, which are cognitive levels that are higher reasoning and abstract problem solving and that sort of thing. Our brains don't even finish developing in that area until late 20s for men, and women and this is on average a little bit earlier. And then you have people who were born into the world who perhaps their wiring's a little different. Perhaps they're on the autism spectrum, have ADHD, auditory processing disorders. You're in an environment where you're a second language speaker, or it's not your primary native language. There's so many factors that come into play. And we're always trying to figure out, how can I be me and make a difference and connect? We're all here to connect with each other. It's all about life, but it's all about love. And it's all about being in relationship with one another. I think that anybody who may be watching this at any point will understand how hard that can be. Navigating relationships, navigating a social landscape. You could not pay me enough money to go back to middle school. I'll tell you that right now. And then there are different social environments once you get out into the workforce and in different industries. There are so many little minute points to navigate. And all the while trying to just be a good person, be a good human, make an impact, and be in relationship with other people. You can't make anybody change their opinion about you. And I always say this to my son: other people's opinion of you is none of your business. You just do the best that you can. So I think that we struggle between those areas of wanting to have an impact. And some people go off with, that means I have to be important. What does important mean? Does important mean I have to have a very executive level title? Does it have to do with how much money I make? Does it have to do with I'm famous? Does it have to do with how many hours I put in? Does it have to do with how I feel about my contribution? There are scales for everything. And then in being in relationship, there's so much to navigate there, and trust. work relationships? Is somebody going to try to take my idea? Or can I share this and it'll be the team, can we work together as a team? There's so many different variables in there and we're so distracted as a society. We've just got so much going on that I think it's really hard to stay grounded. And that's where I'm going to come full circle to what you said in terms of being, how can you be a good human? How can you bring light into the world? I think there comes a point where when you can learn to just stop and when I say be grounded, be physically present in this natural world that we're born into and know that you have a place here. You're made of the stuff of stars and you're made of the stuff of earth. We're all connected. Everything is connected. And you just trusting, I have a place here. And it might not be clear to me right now, but I'll get there. As my dad used to say, I don't know where we're going, but we're making great time.
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
Well, I think there comes a point to be grounded where you start to learn, if you haven't already, learn more about yourself, who you are, what do you like, what do you not like. Take the voices in your head that have told you what you're supposed to be and separate that out into what makes sense, what resonates with you. And growing from there, but always checking back in with yourself. And I think that it's also continuous life learning in terms of communication skills.
Yeah.
It's not always so easy to listen and wanting to jump in. Yeah. I am a very enthusiastic conversationalist. And I feel this sense of urgency, like, oh, I've got all these things I want to say. But that's not necessarily for the betterment of a group or a situation. So I think that it's a continuous learning process as well. And we need to be kind and treat ourselves with love and not be so hard on ourselves, but also give ourselves small goals along the way. I mean, it's you're asking me how to grow.
Yes. Yes.
And you just follow your feet.
Yeah.
And if things get confusing and get difficult, if you can stop, take a moment away and quiet your body and quiet your mind. And there are lots of different techniques to do that in our society. It's not as inherent in our day-to-day as it is in others, but we're learning more, and there are a gazillion scientific studies that talk about the importance of this, not just for your physical health, but for your cognitive health, for your emotional health, psychological health. Being able to just stop and take a breath and learn to be gentle with yourself and gentle on the people around you, and never assuming you're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
There's always something to learn, and there's always something, there's so much we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
So much if you just watch and listen.
Yes. Very powerful. Hayley, the picture that you painted is extremely powerful and compelling, and very, very openly. If I kind of pull sort of the threads a little bit together, even more so in being a good human, being me, if you will, being yourself, dealing with the complexity of the world around us and the reality, thinking about how to navigate to have that positive impact. And it is a struggle. It is very much a struggle. And reaching the point, I'm going to use the word very specifically, reaching the point of epiphany that I need to be grounded and be aware. And I love what you said. If we do nothing but stop for a moment and just really sort of step back in a sense, that could make a huge difference.
You know, a couple things come to mind. One thing is, you and I spoke the other day, and you were trying to think of a name, and it was, on the tip of your tongue, and you just couldn't get it, and you were trying really hard. And I said, Sai, just let it go. The harder you chase it, the farther away it gets from you. Sometimes you just need to stop and take a step back. Research in psychology and the psychology of creativity, when you get in that stuck place, if whether you're a writer and you have writer's block, or you're trying to calculate a very complicated mathematical problem, or you're just, there's something and you're working really hard and you're just stuck. Stop. Take a step away. And in terms of grounding as well, I think that we have a tendency to get stuck in our heads sometimes with the, I call it monkey chatter. And this has to do with getting out of our own way again. Sometimes taking a break and just go outside and just walk for 5 minutes. 15 minutes would be better, but just 5 minutes and just walk on the ground and feel the ground, being focused on that. It also energetically pulls that energy out. It gives you a break, and then you can come back fresh. That's one of the reasons why some of our best ideas come when we're washing the dishes or taking a shower or driving home. It's when we're not so focused on thinking of it, where we have that space for our creativity to just sort of come together and express itself.
And specifically, you mentioned something extremely powerful. We can be so overly focused that it works against us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think a lot of people in the day-to-day don't necessarily consider those almost counterintuitive notions, if you will.
Yeah. 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 They are. It's everything in life, and we've talked about this before. Everything in life is about balance. There's hyper focus, there's hypo focus, when you can't really just get in the groove or get in your wheelhouse and really attack a problem or figure out a solution to something. And then there's hyper focus, where that's all that you see and you push everything else away. There's going to be a time for that. There's absolutely, that's why we have our fight or flight responses. But there's also something called fawning, which I'll talk to you about in a second. Why sometimes we have to shut all the noise and focus because it's an emergency. It's something urgent.
Yep.
And then there are other times where it's just too much. You're on overload and you need to take a break away. So we're built to do that and we're also built to try to find that balance, and everybody's balance is different. It's different at different times in your life. It's different in varying situations. Fawning is something that people do as a response to fear, and it's a survival mechanism, which we're learning more about now, which has to do with people pleasing, where we learn that if you can figure out what somebody else wants, especially with kids and adults, but this happens in dynamics in lots of relationships, where if you figure out what that other person wants and how you can give it to them so that you can avoid conflict, regardless of what that conflict looks like. Over time, you find yourself as an adult and all you're doing is people pleasing, and you don't have a good sense of who you are. What is it that you like, as opposed to all the things that you did to keep the peace or met other people's expectations? What is your purpose? What is it that you want to accomplish in your life other than surviving? How are you going to thrive? And people wondering, is it too late to do that? It's never too late to do that. It's never too late. That I think it can just get so complicated when we're all just going to survive, that I think if I could recommend anything to anybody, it's just a pause. That's all you have to do is pause.
It's very powerful, very powerful. So I want, Hayley, I want to take a very specific sort of scenario and have you react to it, if you will.
Okay.
So
should I be afraid?
Never, not at all. Because it really goes to the heart. There are so many people that are struggling to pause, right? To get out of their own way, quite honestly. I mean, truly struggling. And to the point that they respectfully convince themselves of whatever they want to convince themselves of, and they won't get out of their way.
Well, we do that as a survival mechanism too. Absolutely. If we find ourselves in a situation that is in direct contrast to our belief system, it's very hard to stand in the truth of that. If we find ourselves in a position where we thought we were doing something helpful or useful, and it turns out that it was hurtful, intentionally or not,
Yep.
it's very hard to face truths about yourself. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And definitive, we believe the stories we tell ourselves. Exactly
Absolutely.
exactly like I said. So if you could have a minute or two with someone who is struggling, which we most of us are, and
Mm-hmm.
naturally, how would you help pierce through that veil?
Well, that's a really open question.
These are all open. You've got so much wisdom. I have to think about where is the best way to explore that wisdom, Hayley.
So somebody contacts me and says, "Hey, Hayley, I'd like to work with you. I'm struggling. What should I do?"
That's kind of the question. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I'd have to ask questions. Ask them. I'd want to know, what does that look like to you? What is struggling? What are you struggling with?
So let's play this out between you and
Okay.
I a little
All
bit,
right.
right?
All right.
So I'm gonna take on a bit of that persona, if you
Okay.
will, and say,
Yep.
I try to do good things in what I
Mm-hmm.
perceive as good. I try to do good things. Sometimes it other people perceive it as good. Other times people don't perceive it as good.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and I'm just sharing my story with you, right? Sometimes people take what seems like it's good and make it their own. They almost hijack it from me. Other times they just ignore it and ignore me. So that's a little bit more of the picture I'm playing out.
So, in other words, you're a human being living among human beings.
You could say that.
Okay. Well, I would ask you to give me an example of those situations. I'd want to get a sense of how you're communicating it. I know this is going a little off topic from what you're asking me, but the first thing that pops in my mind, also as a communication specialist, I've worked with people whose speech patterns, whether it's they emphasize certain sounds really hard,
Mm-hmm.
or they speak very loudly or speak very quickly. They don't take pauses between their phrasing. That can sound like someone who's arrogant
Yep.
or angry or any number of personality traits. That's how it can be received. So
Yep.
I'd want to get a sense of, how are you communicating this, first of all? What are the social dynamics?
Mm-hmm.
Try to get a sense, are there any patterns? Are there any specific people in your life where this happens very frequently with Fred and this happens very frequently with Ethel, but then when I'm talking to Barney, it's different. I don't know where these names, I mean, I know where they're coming from, but
Yeah.
to get a better sense of that. And what about the interaction has you feeling that what you're saying and what you're doing, is it harmful, first of
Yep.
all? And you can't control how other people perceive you.
Mm-hmm.
You can try to improve the communication. We would talk about asking for confirmation, making sure that you're understood. It's really funny. In the last 5 years or so, I've worked with so many people who it's become this pattern. Well, they'll talk to someone, they'll give them information, and they'll say, "Does that make sense?" And the first time I heard that, I had started a new job, and I thought, oh, maybe this is like a new cultural thing in the specific field that I was working in. And now I notice everybody says it. And I'm wondering, who's the coach or the communications trainer who gets everybody doing that? Does that make sense? It's a good question, but there needs to be more, because who's going to say, no, it doesn't make sense to me?
Right.
So,
Right.
or do you have just,
Yeah.
to get further information. I think that communication is a very active,
Yeah.
it's a very, very active, I always say that it's an interactive sport.
Yep.
Um, and sometimes we're not always comfortable communicating, and we want to learn a different style. But in terms of, I want to be a good person, I'm trying to be a good person, but I just don't feel like it's having an impact. Perhaps let's look at why you feel that way, and
Yeah.
maybe your perception is not consistent with reality of
Yeah.
what's happening, without saying, that you're living in a fantasy world. It's not that. It's just, again, how we perceive other people's reactions. Um, and sometimes it's just a matter of learning how to communicate differently, whether
Yeah.
that's in speaking or listening. Does that
Yeah,
answer your
yes,
question?
most
Okay.
definitely. No, no, it's fun. Yes, I mean, you called out some very, very powerful elements to think about. One is, how, what's your communication style? How are you communicating? That's one aspect of it. What are the social dynamics? Exactly. If I go one step further, what are the power dynamics? How is
Mm-hmm.
that playing out?
Yep.
And what are the patterns that are consistent? Maybe it's the same pattern emerging again and again, and you're just not recognizing it. And then
Mm-hmm.
definitively, in that interaction, how are you feeling? And if I or what is that interaction that makes you feel a specific way? One way that I commonly will lump all of that together, amongst other things, is, have you considered how other people experience you? Have
Mm-hmm.
you just considered, versus how I experience other people, how do other people experience you?
Mm-hmm.
And most respectfully, most people don't entertain that question too often.
No, no, I think that we are very, and I'm not going to say this to be offensive in any way, but I think to some extent we're very egocentric.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our culture as well. Um, and in a, like go, 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 go world, you're focusing on how you're going to
Yep.
complete all of this, as opposed to, okay, wait a second. The people, and this is something that's become quite clear since the pandemic, is what about all the people in my life?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not with my people. I made a joke the other day. I had a mammography, and I'm like, this is the first hug I've given outside of my immediate family since
Yeah. Yeah.
COVID started. That we don't always think about how we're showing up for other people. Um, I have a tendency myself to do that in the opposite direction, in that I am so focused on being there
Mm-hmm.
and providing a service to other people that I've not been very good at asking for help.
Yep.
I've not been very good at allowing anybody to help me. And I think I had told you 8 years ago, I was very sick. I was in ICU. I had septic shock. I was in septic shock. I was on a ventilator, and it was a pretty scary time. And was on the vent for about 2 weeks. And then as I started to get a little better and understand what was going on around me, um, I had, you're talking about these epiphanies, as these moments of clarity, where I realized, okay, so I'm an integrative medicine practitioner, and I'm a patient in the hospital where I work. And what I do here is help other people. So I've got a choice. I can step back and allow somebody to help me, and I can ask for help, and that's okay. And I had always thought of the work that I do as meaningful work, and also sort of like from a spiritual and maybe somewhat a religious perspective, that when you do good for someone else and you help someone else when they're in need, that it's a blessing to do that, and it's our honor and our responsibility to each other as human beings. But suddenly it occurred to me, if I'm always doing it and I'm not giving anybody else an opportunity to do it, then I'm standing in the way of them getting a blessing. So in doing this, I'm allowing people to help me. It creates more intimate personal relationship. Yes, it makes me vulnerable, and yes, that's scary. but it's a whole different dimension of relationship. And I'm stepping back, and it's like trying to do something for your child all the time. And in the process of trying to help them, what you don't realize is that you might be sending them the signal that they're not capable of doing it by themselves. So it's that same kind of thing. I have completely gone off from where you were.
No, no,
What
no,
you
no. This is
asked me.
no. This is
I don't know how I
no.
got here, but
This you haven't gone off, Hayley. This is the nature of honestly. This is the nature of leadership. These are the when we look at leadership as it manifests in any context, right? Whether it's the home, it's the professional setting, it's another personal setting, whatever it might be. These are the hardcore dynamics, questions, challenges that we have as leaders from any vantage point. And to be very open with you, this is the reason I wanted you to have this conversation, is because I think a lot of leaders think, well, this is all too soft, this is all too wishy-washy. No, you could actually be better leaders if you listen to what Hayley's sharing with us, then we could learn together. So you're exactly on topic.
okay. Well, I just wrote down the original question that you asked me, about, we don't often think about how other people are perceiving us. That's a really scary thing.
Yeah.
I mean, in a life where I say to my son, what other people's opinion of you is none of your business. Don't be distracted by that. On the other hand, it's important to know how you're, are you being the kind of friend that you want to be? Is there anything that you're saying or a way that you're behaving that gives the impression to your coworkers that you want to take all the credit, you always want to be in charge, or you never want to be a leader and you'll just, follow? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if that's not what you want and that's what you're communicating, by doing X, you're actually communicating Y, and you don't realize that. It's super hard to really look at yourself in the mirror sometimes. And it's scary, and you may see things that you don't want to see. I took a training course. I've taken a few courses with Carolyn Mace, who is an author and a theologian, and she's done a lot of research and work on archetypes. And within archetypes are different personality types that people take on, if you will, characteristics that we take on. There's a light and a shadow self. So one of the exercises that we came into the room, we had to just sit at a table, and there were going to be 2 cards where you sat, and those cards are for you. Don't look at them and then get up and move somewhere else because you want different cards. And on the card, on one side was sort of the light or the positive quality of having that archetype. And then on the back was the shadow self, the shadow quality. And I, of course, as these things happen, got exactly what was meant for me. And I was shaken to my core, because I was like, wait a second, I can't be that shadow thing, because I'm this light thing. And I really thought about, it bothered me. And I thought about it long after the workshop and long after I came home from California from this. And it really stuck with me that there are, and these are things that we know somewhat intuitively, but then having the experience in it coming to our awareness is another thing. That, wow, everything isn't always as I think it is. And I need to check myself for my own good and for other people's good. And I need to check in with other people. I need to check in. I used the example before about your child wanting to do things for them because you don't want them to suffer, or you don't want things to be difficult for them, or you just want to, lighten their burden. But at the same time, you might be teaching them, or they might be learning or assuming that you're doing it because they can't. And they think they're not capable. And then that grows into what else are they not capable of? And they're afraid to even consider trying. Those kinds of things really, if you're willing to sit with it as information, even if it's uncomfortable, if you're willing to sit with it and work through it and just see it as information, it makes it so much, it's the first step to just being more at ease with life and the
Yeah.
challenges in life, and then being able to find other ways of being, if that's it, or you say, you know what, this is really where my comfort zone is. Why is that? And explore it, or talk to the people around you
Yeah.
and see how you're interacting with each other, and they'll appreciate it very,
Yeah.
very much. And if they don't, that's information too.
Yes. Yes. It's very powerful because it isn't a question of light or dark. It's a question of integrating the
Yeah,
light and the dark to be a
absolutely.
greater whole. And very, and I love the description that you gave about, or the scenario of, children and helping them not struggle or wanting them not. Well, we, we got our daughter, if you will, very, very ages ago. I was very frank with her. No, I want you to struggle so
Mm-hmm.
you can learn from the struggle. I don't want you to struggle so much that you will then get hurt from it, but
Right.
rather there is something to be gained from that struggle, and bringing a more whole picture as a human being.
And there's also a healthy way to look at struggle as well. To struggle, to work hard, to try to figure out the solution to a problem.
Yeah.
A problem not necessarily being a bad thing that happened, just a conflict or what have you. As opposed to a child who doesn't have the tools to do that.
Yeah.
Whether that's because they have some challenges, or they're not at the age. We have certain expectations for our kids that are just not developmentally accurate. We
Mm-hmm.
expect them to be more mature, or to be able to problem solve, or to see the positive and negatives of certain responses to actions that their brain isn't there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And learning, to accept that, that's a different type of struggle. That's actually the parental struggle of,
Yeah.
wait a second, are my expectations realistic? This is what I learned growing up. This is what I saw growing up. This is what I believe for reason XYZ. Just all of those things doesn't necessarily make it true. That's
Yep.
where it gets very difficult.
Yeah.
But so there's struggle where, okay, what can I do to scaffold for my child so they have an equal playing ground? That's not the phrase. What is it? Is it an equal playing ground? I don't
It's
know.
it's it's
I'm
yeah.
just like, yeah. So you come to the game with the same
Yeah.
at least capabilities.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that your child is always going to succeed at everything they do. It doesn't mean that I'm going to succeed at everything I do, especially parenting,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I've never done it before before I
Yeah.
had a child. Um,
But
but it's being willing to see with new eyes and
yeah.
consider ideas that are outside of your knowledge base, outside of your comfort zone.
Yep.
And again, to do so in an environment where it's safe to do that, it all starts with just a pause. All of
Yes.
that just starts with a pause.
It goes full circle, and there's two key elements that you just called out, Haley, that I definitely want to highlight. There's an element of scaffolding and
Mhm.
readiness. Exactly to your point. Rather than be intrusive into another human being, provide a degree of scaffolding where they can evolve and they can manifest their own identity.
Mhm.
Ready enough to do what's next for them versus be intrusive. You've gone full circle. It starts with a pause.
It all starts with a pause.
So
But we have to learn how to do that sometimes.
yes, yes,
And there are different ways that work for different people. There's no one right way to do it.
yep. And sometimes you need the wake up call. I mean, I've had numerous
Mhm.
I've shared with you. I've had wake up calls relative to my own mortality. And
Mhm.
truly, if I had not had those wake up calls, then I don't know where I'd be.
And a wake up call isn't necessarily a scary one either.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
we've each had scary ones, and I'm sure we've each had epiphanies that were I know that I have, remarkable, like, oh my goodness, I never even considered that
Yeah.
as a possibility. Look at the magnificence of this.
Yeah.
We have those too. And remembering that it's all about balance, and sometimes you're going
Yes.
to be here and sometimes you're going to be here, and you try to find your way back to equilibrium.
Yes. And moments of awe, moments
Ah,
of epiphany. Yes. Yes. There's so much. I, I know we've kept you for a long time. I'll put it that way already. But I think the power of everything you're sharing, it is so deeply relevant in everyday business. If we are to heal as a society, as
mhm,
organizations, as individuals, it starts with that pause, like you said, and goes
mhm.
from there.
Yeah, open communication, but again, it also requires, I would think, every level, I don't know. In my mind, I picture an org chart and all the different circles and squares and parallelograms and what have you
Yeah.
all over, that those are environments individually that create a safe space in which you can communicate authentically, honestly, be who you are, and talk through situations, and then not feel in conflict with
Yeah.
all the other groups around you to come together. And that takes work, and that takes a certain level of a personal sort of sense to it. That, I mean, I don't work in corporate America, and the work I've done in corporate America has always been as a coach
Hmm.
or consulting.
Yeah.
um, so the sense that I get just in talking to people that I know who've always worked in corporate America about, well, did you ask that? And what did they say about this? Oh, we don't talk about those things.
Yeah.
The things are taboo.
Yeah.
Why not? You're just a person talking to another person. You're not violating anybody's rights. You're not, I'm not asking you about your personal life, but I'm asking about you as a person, because you're a person and I'm a person and we're people and we're humans. So why are we pretending that we're not?
You're expressing it wonderfully, because so many workplaces are so dehumanized that it is an act of courage to be human in that
Mm-hmm.
context. And very respectfully to many people in the world, most people lack the courage to be human at work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a
It's
scary thought.
true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot riding on it.
Yes. I definitely, respectfully, call me selfish, I have to have you back ultimately, because there's an area that we're just get, I wanted the area that I'll mention it, and then we can hopefully in the future revisit it. The naturalness of workplaces, of being human. There's a whole element to being naturally who you are, and that naturalness versus an unnatural aspect to it. And I want to explore that at a different time. But my good friend, I want to respect your time. I want to respect, if you will, any parting thoughts before we sign off, Hayley?
Just be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself and be gentle with the people around you. We're all trying to find our place here. And if you just approach everyone without any expectation, or the word bias gets used a lot, but if you can just come to a relationship with people that you know through work, personally, however, without expectation of, well, they're going to do this, so I'm not going to, just meet them as if they were a brand new person, and just show up with good intention, with intentions for the highest good, whatever that may be, and then just trust that. Take a pause, remind yourself who you are, and you just move forward and trust that. Trust your instincts, and just go from there and take your time. There's no rush.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hayley, for the
Thank you,
opportunity.
Sai.
Truly tremendous. And definitely we look forward to more great conversations on the 13th and beyond. And by all means, thank you again and always,
Okay.
Hayley.
And I hope
Thank you.
you all have a great learning experience, and
Thank you, Hayley.
follow the people.
There we go. Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you
Okay,
so
take
much.
care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.